So yeah, this is obviously my little Halloween offering. It's never easy to do Halloween and not do the same kind of thing that we do every year or that everybody else does. But I decided to do some kind of, I don't know if you call them characters based on real people, myths and such like. But I thought I'd cover the kind of, I don't know, should we call it scary or evil or malevolent? These characters throughout history. Some may have been real, some may be myths. Obviously, it's me. I may take a sympathetic, overarching view of them all, and it's just something a bit different for Halloween. So it's not quite, the same old, same old. Obviously, all our opinions are different, and that. Anyway, enough waffle. That's kind of what it's about, as you can see from the title, obviously. All right, folks, we'll get into it. So first up, some are going to be longer than others, and this one's obviously the most famous one. So I'll start with the most famous kind of bad guy from history, and that is obviously Dracula and vampires. Now, vampires and creatures like them date back to sort of the ancient Greeks, and the idea where they were of creatures, that came around draining bodily fluids and that. And let's face it, we all drink the blood of Christ, and that, blood giving life and all of that is quite, a done thing, isn't it? It was the myth kind of spread mainly across medieval Europe, and graves have been found, with stakes through the dead bodies and stuff through the heart area. And this obviously might well have been due to disease in the time that people didn't understand, people being buried alive, certain things making the body rise up and such like. So I suppose it was an understandable fear. And also being buried alive wasn't nice. And also there were people with other diseases that were very pale, looked like they were the Walking Dead kind of thing. Now, the inspiration for the most famous kind of the Dracula we know, Bram Stoker's, was the legendary Vlad the Impaler. And from what I've read about him, yeah, he was quite brutal and sadistic. He did impale people through the jacksie. However, he himself had gone through many years of abuse and torture, so that's going to warp you a bit, isn't it? And also, I'm not defending him, but I'm saying a different time and stuff back then. And the idea that he drank blood and all of that is probably propaganda and absolute nonsense. To maybe start by him, maybe start by people after, to kind of strike fear in the Ottomans that were invading, and make him into some sort of human devil. And he was a leader who did stop the Ottoman Empire from overrunning the whole of Europe, so he's quite famous. And Dracula, the name, comes from Dracul, which means dragon. Then it kind of, Bram Stoker brought it into popular culture. Obviously, this inspired certain sort of mentally unstable people into being serial killers. That links to another one. Within Europe, there's quite a famous one. Who I can't remember her name, but it was a woman. And there was one in America who did the same thing, drinking this blood to kind of live forever and all of that. And modern times have mixed up the mythology, with the idea of Romulus and Remus, the bat and the wolf was all nonsense. And it's kind of come into, certain films and stories and such like, and terrible films and kind of, like Twilight and stuff like that. So it's not going to turn into a critique of the stories. But the old kind of, in the odd sort of reference back to them, obviously. And there's a lot of inconsistencies within these stories and stuff, such as, how can a vampire have sex when they don't have a beating heart? How are they going to get, happy? Because there's no blood going around the body, is there? How can you smoke when you've got no breath and you're dead? You know what I mean? Also, how can they even consume liquid full stop? Because it would just sit there in the stomachs, wouldn't it? Or just pour out their their backside, or they'd
Oh,
ultimately explode,
yes.
wouldn't they? So there's a lot of nonsense. But anyway, the idea of Dracula is that he's obviously evil. He's seductive and charming. Even though these kind of walking corpses would absolutely stink in reality, they'd also be very cold and they'd have really bad breath. And even without actually having no breath, how would they even speak? But anyway, the most famous kind of fragrance to go with the kind of concept of Dracula that we all see in our heads, this seductive, wearing black, red velvet everywhere and everything, is of course, I can't not say it, even though it's not original, is Tom Ford's Noir de Noir. And it does kind of put that image of some sort of handsome chap with black hair, supping on his red wine, eating his truffles, chewing on a few necks, and that's all the kind of notes in Noir de Noir. Sorry, I'm getting all confused. And yeah, it just is that. It just creates that. It's very beautiful. It's very seductive. It's black and red. It's the patchouli and the earthiness, obviously the ground and graves and stuff like that, which is obviously where they stay rejuvenated. On top of that, yeah, it is very much this kind of beautiful red dark rose which you kind of imagine Dracula. Anyway, I'm not going to waffle on too much. So that's Noir de Noir and kind of the story of a vampire and Dracula. And the next kind of creature, character, whatever, is the concept of a werewolf. I must admit, I didn't know much about the origins of a werewolf, and it wasn't Logan from X-Men, obviously. So really, they kind of first appeared in Greek mythology, and this was, your usual kind of typical Zeus overreacting kind of thing. And there was this chap called Lycion who was turned into a wolf because basically he served Zeus a meal of a sacrificed dead boy. I mean, the boy had been sacrificed to Zeus. What? At least this guy had the foresight that he was gonna, make some use of his body. But yeah, Zeus wasn't happy, so he turned him into a wolf. And then they kind of also appear in ancient Norse folklore, where Vikings or pre-Vikings wore these magic kind of wolf pelts, which kind of transform them into more or less man-like wolves who would go on rampages and attack and eat people and such like. And obviously, this appears in Christianity in the Middle Ages. Like a lot of Christianity seems to appear like 1500 years after it, the kind of wolf-like creatures. Anyway, this obviously led to, these stories spread around. And then there's obviously some nutcases that kicked about who claimed they'd become some sort of werewolf and they were transformed, and so they just basically became serial killers who went around doing all sorts of nonsense. And not just that, again, this will come up later with the witches, but there was obviously nut jobs who were claiming, that people were werewolves so that they could execute them and such like, because for whatever reason they didn't like them in it really, and this kind of spread across France and Germany during that time period. And like vampires, I suppose I didn't really go into this. You kind of become a vampire by being bitten, etc. Same with wolves. You might be bitten, or it might just be in your blood, and you transform when there's a full moon, etc. So yeah, that's just kind of a brief werewolf thing, and obviously they're quite big in popular culture. Same kind of idea of becoming one. there in nonsense films like Twilight, but also slightly better films like Underworld. But it's that kind of Romulus Remus thing again, where some are vampires, some are wolves, they're eternal kind of brothers, but eternal enemies, blah 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 blah. Anyway, what I've picked for that is from Maison Francis Kurkdjian, and it's a fragrance called Oud Cashmere Mood. Now, this is one nobody talks about, but again, probably the masterpiece. I mean, Oud Satin Mood is beautiful and all of this, but as a masterpiece, as something original, brilliant, and wearable, Oud Cashmere Mood, I've spoke about it before, it reminds me of a wet sheep or a wet goat. So why can't it be a wet wolf? Let's say it's a wet wolf. And it does smell like sniffing a wet animal. Like even down to the kind of the dirt and the kind of sweat and the kind of dirty animalic muskiness. And that's what a wolf would smell like, isn't it, in reality? Again, they're not going to be some charming bare-chested person taking you out for a romantic meal. They're going to be a bit rough and tumble, a bit of a bad guy. And that's where Oud Cashmere Mood kind of takes you. And I think it's a brilliant fragrance, and I'm not going to waffle on. For werewolves is Oud Cashmere Mood. So next up is, again, another very famous fictional character. The king of all evil and blah blah blah, etc., you know. And that is, of course, Lucifer, which ironically means light bringer, his name. But anyway, Lucifer's backstory. So he was some devilishly handsome, smart, witty, funny chap. And according to kind of the Middle Ages, we'll get a bit more into that, he wanted to rule heaven in place of God. And obviously, because God's such a kind, wonderful, forgiving, you know, lovely chap, he wasn't best pleased about this. And then he kept on going on about, like, I've done all this for you, I've done that for you, you know, I've helped you, blah, blah, blah. And this is how you repay me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw you down to earth. Sort of the concept of sin and all of that comes from that. And God, there's so much nonsense about this. It's when he became Satan, which means adversary. Anyway, this character, this angel or whatever, and Lucifer really exist in the Bible. There's kind of stories where you can interpret it, which obviously quite a lot of that does. But when it started existing in the Bible as the devil, if you like, in the 14th century, again, like a lot of Christianity seems to originate in the Middle Ages, and that's what we kind of follow now. So for 1,500 years, history flipped quite a bit, didn't it? Anyway, he was when Jesus visited Earth, apparently as well. He told, "Don't be tempted by the devil. Don't be led down this dark path. Otherwise, you know, you'll end up in hell." Again, I mean, I'm not going to go too much into this, and I'm not offended. Anyone's entitled to the faith. We're all entitled to our own opinions on certain things. But we did have a big discussion about this in philosophy and theology. And I don't think my opinion really ever changed, in the sense of who was evil out of this chap called God and this chap called Lucifer. Now, he was sent down to blah blah hell and all of this stuff for not really agreeing. You know, they could have come to some agreement. But no, God sent him down to this fiery pit. Although it's never said that he wasn't welcome back into heaven. But anyway, sent him down there. Then everyone who's naughty or sins or is tempted by the devil, who encourages free will and choice, and then this God chap means you must abide by these rules or you will burn and singe in hell forever. If I'm going to create you in my own image, but according to the Bible, if you love who you love, then you're not going to get into heaven. Yeah, we're not going to go too much into this because I know people have their own beliefs, which is fine, whatever. Anyway, the visual concept of the devil as well was another Middle Age invention. I think Dante had a lot to do with this. But the horns and the goat-like appearance is more than likely from Roman and mainly Greek mythology of the kind of, and actually Norse of, the horns and the Hades and people like that, and hell had horns and stuff. And this is a lot of Christianity takes a lot of inspiration from all other religions. Like anything that's Roman, kind of copies a lot of what's gone before, and kind of, yeah. Anyway, I don't mean to be controversial. Now, the choice of fragrance for this was really quite tricky. And I kept thinking it should be a fire fragrance, shouldn't it? Hot, fiery fragrance. But actually, no. I think Dior Sauvage, and I'm not saying that in a nasty way, whether I like it or not, it is one of them. Like the devil, Lucifer, whatever, is supposed to be very seductive, and he's supposed to be, very charming and witty, and again, bringing you in, a good-looking guy. Sauvage is very popular, and people absolutely love it, and they love smelling it on people. So it's the perfect choice, but it doesn't matter whether I love it or not. It's not too weird, not too unusual. That will pique up your suspicion. You wouldn't feel any sort of danger in that until you get really close. Like if you try to sniff Sauvage really close, then you're going to get really severely burnt, aren't you? Your nostrils and your hairs are going to drop out and such, like if you sniff the devil, I imagine. And the same, if you stick your nose in too close to Sauvage, it will do the same because of the synthetics and the strength, etc. So yeah, not meaning to be controversial or anything. I think it's quite a compliment to both the fragrance and Lucifer, but that's Dior Sauvage. So next up would be a character that kind of I'm close to, if you like. It's from a book, obviously we read at school and whatnot, but I read it at university, and it really kind of intrigued me because I learnt about the author, and that's obviously it's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Now the concept, I suppose, was kind of new, but it came about in this era of electricity coming into it, and this idea that electricity could reanimate life and things. This science was quite true at the time. Obviously it doesn't work quite like that, but obviously it got into the imagination of the people around, and then the kind of moral things about bringing back something to life and that. Anyway, Frankenstein, as we all know, isn't the monster, and the monster, if you like, is who we're talking about. Now, I probably will ramble on about who's really the monster, etc. But anyway, Frankenstein is created through grief and frustration, isn't he? He's put together by Dr. Frankenstein. We'll call him Jeff, because it just makes it easier for this, doesn't it? And so Dr. Frankenstein puts together the monster, and then he comes alive. And straight away, obviously, the doctor's quite horrified by what he's created. And Frankenstein, sorry, was it Derek? Derek breaks out, and no, Jeff, wasn't it? Anyway, that's by the by. Jeff the monster breaks out and gets into kind of the big wide world. And obviously straight away, he's walking along this road, he realises that people are terrified of him for some reason, and he can't really understand why, and he doesn't have that kind of grasp of it. Anyway, he tries to mix with people, other people he comes across and that, and ultimately ends up in this house, but like below the floorboards, where he learns about what humans are, what family life is, and he does secretly help out a little bit, and eventually he gets the courage to kind of come out, and obviously they're repulsed by him, etc, and terrified of him and stuff. I believe he can't understand this, and he hates his dad, if you like, or his creator, the Doctor. And you know, he kills the odd people, and wants to ultimately take his revenge on him for abandoning him and creating him in the first place. And all he asks him for is a companion to make another one. Obviously the Doctor doesn't want to do this because of how badly he turned out. He thinks he's malevolent and evil and all of that. Anyway, that's kind of by the by, isn't it? So what this story is about, and the character to me, is I think it's a story about Mary herself. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole kind of history of Mary Shelley and whatnot, but the point is, she had a lot of tragedy in her life, a lot of upset, and most definitely suffered from some sort of depression and that. And I believe she committed incest and with cousins and whatnot, but you know, and she married a much older man, Percy Shelley. Just, I mean, a little, not waffling on, but a little side thing. I'd have loved to have hung about with Byron Shelley and Mary Shelley. What a three people, what a wild life it would have been. Anyway, to me, this is how I understood the story, and my big assignment was on as the monster's her. Because she goes through miscarriage after miscarriage, as well as all these deaths and tragedies in a story. So it's kind of like everything she touched died and turned to ashes, and that's why I believe this story kind of came about for her. But anyway, that's by the by. How would I scent Jeff the monster? So for me, I wanted to go for something kind of sad and tragic, and a little bit, you know, a little bit kind of deep and representative of that kind of dark, misty atmosphere and what have you. And from Maison Violet, Poupée d'Automne, I thought was a perfect one. Now it's got this chalky iris in it, like the stone, like the cold stone floors, and maybe the colour of his flesh with the violet. Now the violet does have a sweet powderiness, but you could also look at it as that kind of dusty stone of his skin, and purple could be quite a sad colour, can't it? Like a lighter colour, like a mauve or whatever, mixing with the iris, and it kind of gives that colour of his skin very much to me. And obviously it represents the fragrance itself is the purple of autumn, or purple autumn, whatever. And autumn is the time when everything starts to die, isn't it? And it is a sad season. It's my favourite season, but it's kind of the calm wind down. And I imagine that's what Jeff the monster, his mind was like quite tragic, quite sad, quite ready for the end. He wanted to not suffer anymore, didn't he? And was I think he goaded Frankenstein to end it all for him, didn't he? Well, he never wanted his suffering to end for what he'd put him through. But anyway, yeah, Poupée d'Automne, I think, suits the monster, inverted commas, perfectly. So for Frankenstein's monster, the fragrance I've picked is Poupée d'Automne from Maison Violet. So next is another kind of iconic Halloween character, person, whatever, is of course ghosts and poltergeists. Now I'm not going to get into a massive history of this. This has been there since the dawn of humanity, hasn't it, really? And it all obviously stems from we're human, we don't want death to be the end, and we also have no real understanding of death, do we, either? Now I'm not going to, personally, I don't believe in ghosts and poltergeists, but I don't know everything in the world. I'm not some sort of know-it-all genius, am I? So yeah, to me, I mean, nobody wants to know this. What a ghost is something we can't really see, something that's there, be it kind of magnetic stuff in the air, or just the way the dust and the light goes, and our human thing, that our eyes, the world doesn't look like we think it looks. Our eyes make it look understandable to us. Like if you really saw a human all built up of crawling cells and microbes and what have you, you'd be quite horrified by that. And obviously I think we see things upside down, our eyes flip them, don't we? But anyway, ghosts and poltergeists. Ghosts are kind of seen as being nicer, aren't they? Friendlier. Casper and whatnot. Kind of old spirits there to guide you, old family, etc, etc. Whereas poltergeists are seen as more malevolent, more evil, more kind of there to do us harm, cause us distress. They're angry. And where the kind of concept comes from is that they're beings that are stuck. Purgatory is the Christian view, isn't it? But stuck between worlds, stuck between the living and the dead. So they're not quite there. And for me, what's always confused me is why nobody ever sees a ghost of a mushroom or a dog or a cow or an elephant. It's always people, which is most bizarre. But again, everyone's opinions are valid and what have you. Plus, it quite often gives comfort to people to see and believe in these things, doesn't it? So, no disrespect there. And what I've picked for ghosts, poltergeists, etc. is Dior's Bois d'Argent, which, as you can get from the name, silver woods, is it? But to me, it's like a big fluffy cloud, like maybe a bit of a cold cloud, a bit silver, like the appearance of a ghost, a bit kind of transparent and whatnot. And I just think it suits the idea of a ghost perfectly, doesn't it? And that's it. Also, it's quite a cold fragrance, whereas it's fluffy and lovely. If you pass through a ghost or what have you, it's supposed to send chills through your body, isn't it? But anyway, yeah, for ghosts and poltergeists is Dior's Bois d'Argent. So next up is not a very, well, it's not really very scary, is pirates. And people still dress up as pirates and whatnot, don't they? I have quite a strong opinion on pirates. Now pirates, we're not talking in the modern day sense of pirates, you know, downloading illegal music, causing terrorism and destroying the entire universe. Not them sorts of pirates. Or the pirates that Cartman comes across in South Park. We're talking, you know, pirates of the kind of 16th, 17th, 18th century and whatnot. Now pirates get a bad rap, but pirates are actually privateers, independent people, and were quite often employed by governments, such as our own government, to go and attack French booty ships and Spanish booty ships. But because they didn't have a British flag, they had a Jolly Roger or whatever there, then we couldn't be held responsible for this. Now a lot of pirates turned against this. They wanted to be free of these empires which they were against slavery, believe it or not, and things like that. They were quite ahead of their time. But obviously because of that, governments then hated them and hunted them down, gave them a bad name, saying they were murderous, rum-swilling, ahar, me mateys kind of people. When in actual fact, even the ones with the worst reputation weren't really like that at all. And a lot of the pirates have come from the nobility and gentry, etc. I'm not going to go too much into depth with it. But again, another misunderstood group of people who were persecuted. You got to see this theme running through this video. A lot of propaganda and nonsense written about people, certain people don't like, etc. Isn't it really? Anyway, I'm going to waffle on too much about that. But so, for pirates, what have I chosen? Well, there's quite a few fragrances I could have gone for, with a lot of rum, whiskey, brandy and all of that. And I've gone for the most obvious one you can ever imagine, because my pirate is a posh pirate. He's a classy pirate. He doesn't have a patch over his eye or a wooden leg. He's got a big galleon filled with velvet leather seats and lots of expensive exotic spices like cinnamon. See where I'm going with this? And he's taking the finest brandy over to God, I hate this dirty word, the colonies, for people to enjoy there. This little paradise the pirates have there. So yeah, of course, it's Angel's Share. And I think this is what pirates would have really drank. Rum was more to do with the Royal Navy than pirates, I say. I would say pirates had better taste and a more refined tongue than the Royal Navy and such like at that period. So yeah, for pirates, I have gone for Angel's Share from Killian. So next is wizards, which is they're not in themselves malevolent, so we'll kind of put sorcerers in there too. Now the history of wizards goes back a long way. Probably associate them mostly with the Druids, and the most famous wizard in my part of the world, I would say, is Merlin, who is he's Welsh, obviously. And was probably descended of the Druids. Now the Druids were viewed by the Romans as some sort of dodgy, awful, evil people who did spells and all of this. The simple fact of the matter is they were just people who kind of, you know, like witches, which we'll come on to, worked with herbs and could heal things. It's just something the stupid Romans couldn't understand really, and they were none too tolerant of different faiths and religions, because they were mainly pagans, weren't they, worshipping their own gods and the earth and whatnot. So, and the more malevolent ones, they've been around such a long time, will be people like, if you look at the 1001 Nights or whatever it is, and Aladdin, you've got Jafar, who's quite a malevolent sorcerer who was doing things for his own benefit really, and to stay in power and to manipulate the king. And then from these, kind of in more modern culture, obviously Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien wrote it because in our country we didn't really have any myths or stories. I mean, the stories of Camelot and Merlin and Arthur, apart from them kind of being Welsh, which is still part of Britain, but that's the chances are the stories themselves originated in France. So you know that's kind of why I did it, and obviously taking from Merlin and whatnot, and a lot of Lord of the Rings, you could kind of focus around that idea, you know, of ancient kings saving the world, magical beings, the wizards. You've got Gandalf, who was probably more Merlin. And you've got kind of, what's his face, Saruman, who could have been based on Morgana, who we will talk about a little bit in the Witches kind of thing. They're much the same thing, it's just for some reason over time, because society's misogynist and sexist, isn't it? Wizards haven't always been viewed as inherently bad. But yeah, so anyway, we'll kind of imagine it's Merlin / Gandalf who were kind of sent in here, and they've stretched, like I say, they've stretched on into modern culture and that. And how I don't really talk about much. I've only really got a little bit of it anyway, and that's Nishani's Annie. And the reason I've gone for that is it's resins, and it's got this green feel through it, and it's that green feel through the resins and the vanilla that I think this makes this a perfect kind of Gandalf scent or Merlin scent, because they would be sweet and jolly. They'd work with all sorts of materials to make people happy and whatnot, as well as they would also have that kind of touch of the green stuff, the herbs. Is there elemi and stuff in it as well, which adds to the kind of citric kind of greenness. And there's lots of resins again. You'd imagine the incense and them working with these magical materials. So I just think it's a really good one to represent these ancient wizards. I mean, whether we go for Gandalf or Merlin, they would have used such materials and touches of exotic magical spices and whatnot. So I think that is a great one. So for wizards, I've gone for Nishani's. And the last one in the video is going to be witches. Now, witches, have always been kind of viewed as like evil women trying to corrupt you, working for the devil. They kind of come from a long way back, and it's kind of a term that was associated with any sort of woman that you didn't like. In other words, it was kind of women who were more intelligent than men, women who could heal people, women who were kind of go against religion and whatnot. And obviously, even as far back as nonsense written in the Bible, it was always women corrupting men. So women shouldn't hold such power and all of this. And if they did, it was clearly evil and for bad reasons. When in actual fact, they were just the same as wizards or, you know, mystic men or whatever. They were just kind of probably using the old pagan ways of mixing herbs and spices, healing people, you know, looking after people, doing things like that. And obviously, I'm not going to go way too much into detail. You noticed I've shortened them down. But obviously, these sorts of women were persecuted. Anything that went wrong, you know, say there was drought or pestilence and what have you, it's obviously because of witchcraft. It's not because the men doing it were too stupid to plant the fields right, or the weather just wasn't particularly right. They get blamed. And then it became this kind of thing where there's always these groups of people who get the blame for everything. Not just in the ancient world and stuff, it's the same old trick that goes on nowadays in so-called developed nations. So yeah, witches were very hard done to and persecuted. For, let's face it, no particular reason other than being particularly smart, helpful people, and more smart and helpful than the people in power and the government. And obviously they didn't understand it. So yeah, they were persecuted. Anyway, I'm not going to waffle on. We all kind of know where it all comes from, and that there were many disgusting massacres of people. I think men could be called witches as well at that point, and there was probably men burnt, but it was mainly women, wasn't it? And what I've picked to represent this other Halloween kind of character person is portrait of a lady even, from Frederick Mal. And the reason I've picked that is it's obviously the feminine, although I don't believe in feminine notes and that, but rose I think can be associated with anyone, can't it? But let's, for this point, say it's kind of associated with a kind of femininity and the patchouli and all the greenness and the warmth and the earthiness and the touch of herbs in Portrait of a Lady. I just think it kind of suits it all very nicely, and it's quite a seductive fragrance. And obviously these women were very seductive, using their evils to seduce men, dodgy men that is, and whatnot. So yeah, Portrait of a Lady for witches. So yeah, that's the video done. It's just as kind of, I wanted to do something a bit different for Halloween. It's not really, is it? It's just probably got, you know me, I like a bit of my history, and I can't help but relate things to modern times. And when you look at things, yeah, these are scary characters used in Halloween and whatnot, but there's two sides and they all originate somewhere. And it tends to be that there's no such thing as evil, is there? It's subjective. It's generally things we're scared of, are things we don't understand, and they tend to get kind of the rough brunt time of it all, don't they? So yeah, no need to waffle on much. Oh sugar, hang on. Yeah, this hill's a bit much in it, so you might see me die here. Maybe I'll be saved by a kindly ghost or witch or whatever. Right, I'm up there. So yeah, what about you? What do you kind of associate with Halloween? How would you scent these people and whatnot? Alright, thanks for watching, folks.